Thank you, Sabina, very much. As you can see, this session has been organized in a manner that the time allocation was provided by seniority. David had the most time, and our youngest protagonist in this panel, Dr. Dafna Tenner, will be given 10 minutes, therefore, in order to react to these two lectures. And then we'll move on to discussion.
I would like to thank Professor Finkelhor and Professor Anderson for their enlightening presentations. I find it extremely important to gain extensive knowledge of the phenomenon and as well to review empirically based ways of dealing with it. This reminds me that when the youth in Professor Isikovic and Professor Lewiesel's study were asked to refer to how they felt filling out the questionnaire about child abuse and whether they themselves had been abused, one of them wrote the researchers, "So what are you going to do about it?" I believe offering a way to deal with what we know is of major importance. So when listening to you, I had a few thoughts. Professor Finkelhor, you talked about the diversity of the dynamics of child sexual abuse. And I was wondering, what would you think about the differences between country, the cultural context? What is the meaning of the context or the Israeli one? So when I thought about it, I thought about me being an Israeli researcher studying child sexual abuse. And I remembered my research about forgiving incest. I interviewed Israeli Jewish women abused by family members as children and asked them about their perception of forgiving their offender. And I put, בסוגריים, that I'm talking about the Jewish Israeli context, and of course there are other contexts of the Israeli society. So when I built my interview guide, I was relying heavily on studies done in the US and Europe. But when I interviewed the women themselves, I realized how important the context of their being part of the Israeli society. First, almost all of them asked me in one way or another, how can they forgive their offender when he never admitted to what he did and never showed repentance? Now, these conceptions of forgiveness fit Judaism. Christianity can require unconditional forgiveness, independent of the perpetrator repentance. Judaism is more stringent and difficult in enabling forgiveness, and repentance seemed to be a crucial concept there. So that was one Israeli context. But yet I also found out that many of the interviewees felt they had to forgive their intrafamilial perpetrator in order to preserve or renew family relationship. Now, I think this also fits with the Israeli society when the family occupies a crucial position, either because of the influence of religion or the threat to its security. Anyway, these women thought they were obligated to be part of their family, including the abusive family member, in order to be part of the Israeli society. So I was wondering, Professor Finkelhor, if you can define some universal versus unique cultural aspects that we should bear in mind when considering child sexual abuse. And my second thought for you is based on your presentation of the diversity of dynamics and the misconception. And here I wish to focus on one Israeli event which was at the center of the media reporting in recent weeks. We call it the woman from Kiryat Gat. And I want to say with a lot of caution that all I know come from the media. So just for you guys, Kiryat Gat is a city in the southern Israel and is considered somewhat isolated. A woman in her 40s was accused of having intercourse with hundreds of teenage boys. The story was apparently disclosed to the police, and it was suspected she may be carrying the HIV virus. She was arrested on suspicion of pedophilia and spreading disease. It was later revealed that the woman was known to and had been treated by welfare authorities. also that the youth themselves had been active, passing on her identity to others. The sexual encounter included aggression towards and humiliation of the woman. Public opinion was divided between seeing her as either a victim or an offender. Now, I think there are many misconceptions which you talked about which are rooted in the way this case was perceived in the media. For example, referring to the woman as a pedophile, though we're talking about teenage boys. Or making her look like the predatory type when it was really unclear that this is actually the case. But I think there's also something in that media cover which represented the society wished to protect itself from the overwhelming need to deal with the ambiguity of child sexual abuse. I think we try to color child sexual abuse in black and white, to gain some dichotomic understanding about it in order to encapsulate it and put it aside, to ignore from the complexity. She is either a victim or an offender, nothing in between, and somebody has to pay the price. I was wondering what would be your view of such a case, and what should we bear in mind while dealing with this? And now I would like to address your presentation, Professor Anderson. I continue my first question on universal versus unique cultural aspects. It was fascinating to see the German experience of public awareness and of the prevention. And it was really nice to see how it was implemented in the legal level. But I was wondering, from your experience, what do you think is very specific to the German experience, and what do you think can be implemented to other countries, such as Israel, of course? And my second thought was about the discussion about how much prevention we need and how we need, to talk to that our crowd should be also parents and also teachers and therapists and etc. And then I thought how little money we have and what do we do with it? And if we really have to focus on one prevention program, what should we focus on? So an initial thought I had, if we're talking about young children, then let's focus on the caregivers. But if we're talking about adolescent, then maybe we should concentrate in the adolescent. And David, I think you talked about it, but I'm not sure that now that adolescent really see themselves as expert and their peer groups as experts. So maybe we should concentrate on them and try to help themselves and their peers. So the other issue that crossed my mind, this is the last one, I have time, right?
This is the last one.
The last, but it's pretty long. But, okay. Let me see. Okay. It crossed my mind when you talked about the specific prevention program. So I remember this one qualitative study that focused on sibling sexual abuse, פגיעה מינית בין אחים. So there was one mother, she was interviewed, and it was the way she perceived her response, the mother response, to the fact that her daughter disclosed to her that she was abused by her brother. So the mother said this, she said, if she only told me it was someone else, I could have been so empathic towards her. And then she said, if she only told me that she was offended by somebody, then waited a couple of hours and then tell me it was my son, then I could be empathic with her. But she just told me and I just couldn't bear it. And it was hard to read, and it made me wonder, are these programs, this one that you mentioned and other programs that we have in Israel, do they fit the gray area of child sexual abuse? And as I see it, and these are only my initial thought, an important goal for us is to teach others in society, how to understand sexual abuse, but more than that, to emphasize on the complexity of the phenomenon of child sexual abuse and to get them more familiarized with its multi-phase dimensions. So, for example, to question, and David, you talked about the assumption that all disclosures are necessary, helpful, or that we need to encourage the child to keep on talking about the abuse in order for him to recover. Just look at the complexity of statutory relationship and how hard is it for a teen to be exposed after disclosure to all the authorities when sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes this can be experienced as traumatizing rather than the relationship itself that we call them abusive. So maybe we should also teach ourselves and others how to listen to survivors and to let them express their feelings, even if it's positive feelings toward their offenders. And maybe we can teach each other and others to stop blaming them from suffering from some kind of Stockholm syndrome, you know, when the victim is sympathizing with the offender. Maybe if we could teach these broader perspectives on the gray area, we could provide more and more supportive figures in these children's lives. So I was wondering if you have some thought about that. So I would like to thank you both, and I think we have a lot to learn from your expertise while bearing in mind our special Israeli context. Thank you.